The Supreme Court hears arguments today on President Biden's controversial vaccine mandates. The fate of more than 80 million American workers hangs in the balance.
The mandate has sparked nationwide protests and multiple lawsuits, fueled by speculation about how far the government can go in a national emergency. CBN's Brody Carter reports.
A deepening divide over vaccine mandates has worked its way through the legal system, reaching the High Court. The justice's decision could set a precedent in a balance between personal freedom and the government's power to act in a crisis.
What's at stake is whether or not our federal government can claim vast, expansive powers in times of emergency.
Justices will hear arguments on the constitutionality of President Biden's emergency executive order, forcing private businesses with 100 or more employees to submit to mandatory vaccinations or face weekly testing.
And the answer to that surely has to be no. Otherwise, this concept of a limited federal government of enumerated powers has really been stretched to the breaking point.
Attorney Ryan Bangert with Alliance Defending Freedom says the vaccine mandate case is moving swiftly. OSHA first announced how it would enforce the mandate in November, which was immediately challenged in court. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals then froze the mandate and lifted the stay in December. Now the Supreme Court has agreed to step in.
If the court finds that the mandate should be stayed, then that would provide protection to our clients as well.
That decision would send the case back to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is overseeing all consolidated legal challenges to vaccine mandates.
There's also the possibility the court could simply decide the merits of the entire case tomorrow. We just don't know how the court's going to ultimately decide to handle this.
If the mandate is reinstated, businesses not following the rules could face fines of more than $13,000 per violation.
February 9th is the deadline for full compliance with the testing requirement.
If the court lets this go forward, we will see a big shift in power in the federal government from Congress to the federal bureaucracy.
Doug Badger with the Heritage Foundation says the main issue is whether OSHA, an executive branch agency, can make federal law.
But they can only do things that Congress has empowered them to do. Congress has not empowered OSHA to impose a vaccine mandate on businesses with 100 or more employees.
Other cases pending review, which will not be judged today, include individual state mandates, religious objections to vaccines, and dozens of litigations representing firms, businesses, and religious entities opposed to OSHA's mandate. The Supreme Court is also reviewing a separate mandate that would impact roughly 17 million healthcare workers. In total, the High Court will determine the fate of vaccine requirements affecting more than 80 million people. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Well, for more on this story, Michael Sheetzelp joins us now. He's a senior fellow at the Robertson Center for Constitutional Law at Regent University. So, Michael, walk us through, what are the issues before the court? What are the constitutional issues, the regulatory issues? Help us understand what's at stake.
Well, as the video just alluded to, Gordon, the main constitutional issue at stake is, what is the scope of the federal government's power? All of this is going to come down, honestly, to the scope of OSHA's power. So the first thing the court's going to look at isn't going to be constitutional at all. It's going to be the issue of how narrowly defined are OSHA's powers, and is this mandate within the scope of that power? And if the court decides that, yes, this mandate was within the scope of OSHA's power to pass, then the court will look at whether or not Congress actually had the power to delegate that and whether they did so in a constitutional manner.
Okay. Well, the courts have so far declined to block all state vaccine mandates. So does that have any bearing on this case at all?
I don't think it does. So a lot of people refer to a case called Jacobson from 1905, where this was considered a public health issue. And public health generally falls within the police powers, and the police power belongs to the state. The federal courts over and over have reiterated that the federal government does not possess a police power. Yes, the states can pass these vaccine mandates, but there's still an open question as to whether or not the federal government can. And of course, the question facing the court today is whether OSHA, in fact, has that power.
All right, well, handicap the case for us. What do you think are the possible outcomes, and what's the likely outcome after today's hearing?
That's it's always a tricky question, but I think the most likely outcome is that you're going to get a majority of the court that finds that this overstepped OSHA's power. I believe the dissent below in the Sixth Circuit by Judge Larson got it correct, that this was not necessary, that there were other measures that can be taken by OSHA, and that this probably steps outside of OSHA's focus on occupational health. It's not often that OSHA is able to pass a mandate that follows people home from the workplace. As Judge Larson pointed out below, you can make people wear flame retardant clothing at the office, but you can't make them wear flame retardant clothing around the clock to prevent fire injuries. So the most likely outcome is that the court will probably decide this on statutory grounds, and that this will be this will have been an overstepping of those boundaries that Congress provided.
Do you think that they're going to actually decide it on the merits, or are they going to issue some kind of mandate, then refer it back to the Sixth Circuit for more deliberation?
My guess would be that they're not going to decide this on the merits. So we're at this temporary, or I'm sorry, this preliminary injunction. They're trying to stay the enforcement of this mandate. And one of the factors in choosing whether or not to stay this, or deciding whether or not to stay the issue, is the likelihood of success on the merits. And so the court will have to find that if it does stay the vaccine mandate, it would have to find that the challengers are likely to prevail on the merits. So there is going to have to be some sort of analysis of the legal issues here, but I don't think that they will decide it. It will be a de facto decision on the merits. The court will set out its standard and interpret the law as it believes it should be, and no lower court's going to be willing to go against that, at least not in my opinion.
Okay, assuming they put a stay on it, what do you think the administration's response is going to be? Are they going to try to push some kind of legislation through Congress, and what would that mean?
That's a great question. I don't know what the administration might try to do. I think it would be foolhardy to consider or to continue to push this legislation, or sorry, to push this litigation. But there's always the chance that they could try to push something through Congress. Although, as we've seen, the president's political acumen right now seems to be the president has misjudged some of his policy initiatives and the support that he had in Congress. And so it would be interesting to see if there was support for this in both chambers of Congress.
Oh, well said. All right, Michael, thank you for joining us, and thanks for everything the Robertson Center is doing at Regent Law School.
Thank you.